of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. Armada en route. President Trump reviving his threats against Iran's senior leadership as a carrier strike group makes its way toward the Middle East. We'll have more on what this latest move means for tensions in the region. Plus, Rieder's odds rise, momentum building around BlackRock's Rick Rieder. It's a potential pick for Fed chair. Bloomberg reporting exclusively tonight. The president apparently impressed by Rieder's Wall Street experience, his ideas for overhauling the Fed, what this selection could signal for bond markets and beyond. And getting schooled on snow days.
While we are still waiting to make a final decision on whether school will be in person or virtual, we will communicate that decision to families by noon on Sunday. That is going to be a decision between in-person learning and remote learning. I have to apologize to the students that were hoping for a different answer. For a traditional snow day, that will not be the case.
Say it ain't so. New York City students get a big lesson about the future of snow days under their new mayor, Mamdani. That powerful winter storm now set to bring crippling ice, heavy snow, and dangerous cold to millions across the country this weekend, threatening widespread power outages, treacherous travel. Airlines already canceling thousands of flights. Former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate joins us with the latest straight ahead. That is where we begin this evening. That major winter storm expected to start arriving tonight, snarling traffic, threatening blackouts for huge parts of the country, from Texas to the Northeast. Some 200 million people live in the area likely to be impacted by this storm, as thousands of flights, hundreds of Amtrak trains already get canceled. With energy prices, specifically natural gas, surging in the lead up here, many of the nation's governors issuing disaster declarations as mayors reassure the public of their expected response. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani in a briefing earlier today.
We haven't seen a foot of snowfall in quick succession since nearly 5 years ago. This weekend is going to be cold. It is going to be windy, and above all else, it is going to be a weekend where your city is prepared.
Joining us now from Texas, where a disaster declaration has already been issued, Bloomberg's Texas Bureau Chief Julie Fine. It's great to have you, Julie, and of course, we've got our eyes looking closely at Texas because of the ice storm and the extreme damage, the widespread blackouts that the grid experienced back in 2021. Is Texas ready?
The governor says Texas is ready. The governor says the grid is in better shape than it ever has been. There were some changes made by the Texas legislature for data centers and other businesses to lessen the load in situations like that. Governor, again, saying the state is ready. The cities have been making their plans as well. But the one thing that you cannot count on is whether that ice hits the power lines. You can have plenty of power, but if they are weighed down and they go, there could be a lot of localized outages to deal with. The governor, as you said, Joe, did declare that disaster declaration for quite a bit of Texas. That will make getting resources in that much easier.
Well, you know, of course, it's one thing to harden infrastructure and protect the grid. It's another thing to move snow and ice. And in the case of Texas, of course, this is going to be an ice story. You don't have all the equipment that folks in the Northeast take for granted. Julie, are they bringing it in from other states?
Well, what they'll do is they'll use all the resources they have. But like you said, Joe, they're just simply not equipped with what you are equipped with in Washington, D.C. or New York City. These are roads that are built for heat, not exactly snow. They will rely on this state as much as they can. There are neighboring states, but neighboring states like Oklahoma will have problems of its own. So the governor obviously, though, feels by putting that disaster declaration out that there are as many resources as possible in place beforehand should something happen.
All right, Julie, hunker down. Be safe. Bloomberg's Texas Bureau Chief Julie Fine with us live from Dallas. With the winter storm expected to hit, we learned today planned terminations at FEMA that began earlier this month have been halted. With an internal email sent to officials this week instructing FEMA leaders to cease offboarding certain employees immediately as heavy snow, ice, extreme cold prepares to grip much of the nation. Joining us now with his insights into all of this and what we're about to experience, Craig Fugate, former FEMA administrator in the Obama administration. Craig, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. You know what the forecasts are calling for, up to 16 inches of snow in New York. We were just talking to Julie down in Texas. It's going to be massive, potentially amounts of ice, maybe a foot here in the Capitol. Is that what you're expecting?
Well, if you look at the National Weather Service forecast, I really want to emphasize, we can move snow, we can plow it. but they're talking about catastrophic ice accumulations. As Julie's pointing out, this is the big danger. It's going to cause the most damage, it's going to knock out the most power, and it's going to make response extremely difficult. I think that's what we should be focusing on. These areas that are about to be hit with this ice storm, if this forecast materializes, it's going to be a long duration power outage for a lot of people while they're also experiencing extreme cold.
Talked to Dan Criswell earlier today, who, of course, had the same position you had at FEMA and was, in fact, on the job shortly after that ice storm that wreaked havoc on Texas. She talked about the need to pre-position equipment and resources. Here's what she said.
2/3 of all of the FEMA regions are going to be impacted by this, close to 200 million people. And that's where FEMA has the ability to have these centralized stockpiles of equipment ready to move out to states as they identify any needs. And so the goal here is to pre-position where you can, especially areas that are going to get a lot of snow, because once the snow comes in, it's going to be harder to move those in. But they only do that at the request of the state.
It's pretty remarkable, Craig, to think 2/3, as she said, of all FEMA regions are going to be impacted by this storm. Considering the cuts that the agency has felt, some 14% of the agency over the past year, is FEMA ready?
Well, let's be clear. They're not the initial response. The primary response is going to be state and local governments. And FEMA's primary role is that, as Dan was pointing out, is moving in some of the limited generators and other supplies. It's really going to be the financial impacts. And, that's going to come back to how bad it is, governor's requests, and the president's acting on it. But the initial response is still going to be state and local governments. And I want to add one more thing. Everybody thinks FEMA's a responder. They're not. The fastest response in these types of disasters, quite honestly, neighbors checking on neighbors.
Yeah. Well, tell us what FEMA will be doing in states like Texas then.
Well, they're already in or talking with the governors. They did that today. They've already pre-positioned their trucks, their drivers, their equipment. Until they actually start getting specific requests from governors, they're anticipating it. And they're in those state operation centers working side by side. The regional operation centers are stood up. So all the pieces are in place for tying in those requests for any specific resources the governors have into the federal family of resources, including the Department of Defense. After the storm comes through, assessments will be made and determinations in many of these types of events. It's going to be what are the financial impacts of, particularly the impacts of picking up debris if a lot of trees have come down.
What do you make of FEMA's decision to halt these planned terminations? This is FEMA's cadre of on-call response recovery employees, core employees, I think, as you call them. These are temporary workers in 2 or 4 year, I believe, contracts. Should they have been dispatched to begin with? Should they be kept now that this order has been made?
Well, a lot of these folks are in the recovery space. And again, these are people that are tied to disaster funding. So they, in many cases, are full-time, not permanent employees that are tied to disaster work. And that number actually goes up and goes down. Now, the only thing I would ask, if it was a good idea last week to terminate them, what changed today? Because year-round we have earthquakes. It's not like you just do this for hurricane season. So you got to kind of go back and ask the question, well, what changed since Monday? And don't tell me it's because you got an ice storm, because what happened if you had an earthquake the day after you turn? Either you need them or you don't.
Isn't that something? I talked to Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis about this today, the Republican from New York, who expressed some concern. And, of course, they're bracing for a big hit right now in New York, but suggested that some agencies like FEMA could use a little downsizing. Here's how she put it.
I think that a lot of these agencies do have bloat. There is bureaucracy. There is some savings to be had. I also think that we need to be targeted and use precision when doing this. Like, we can't just fire employees that are needed. So I haven't been able to look at exactly what FEMA has announced here, but certainly I will be very vocal if it's going to be something that would impact my district. Everybody knows there's a lot of bloat and bureaucracy in Washington, and when we can find efficiencies to not only bring our debt down, but to also protect the taxpayers.
Craig, is bloat a word that you would associate with FEMA?
Well, when you look at any government organization, people are always going, you can make changes, you can save. But you got to go back to the basic idea. FEMA's got to support 50 states, the territories, and tribes. There can be multiple disasters at any given time, and they are still recovering from previous disasters. If you want to reduce the workforce, you got to change the process and reduce the overhead. And I don't disagree, but I think too often we talk about FEMA and we forget you really need to look at the Stafford Act, which is the disaster funding mechanism, and the requirements and how that is administered. There's some good legislation that would simplify that. I think if we can simplify those procedures, it will take less staff. It will speed up recovery. It will maintain financial accountability.
Really interesting answer. You might have heard no more snow days in New York City, according to Mayor Mamdani. Was that premature based on what we might see on Monday?
No, I mean, you can ask anybody in government these days. Snow days don't exist. You just work remotely. The only thing that would disrupt that is if the power and internet go down.
Yeah, I don't know. You imagine being a kid without snow days, Craig Fugate? You might not have been FEMA Administrator without those favorite mornings, no?
Well, I grew up in Florida, but my dad was in the Navy, so I did go through a couple of snow days in Maryland and Virginia. They were infrequent. But today, you kind of asked the question, with technology, do you really need to give them a day off? I would like it a day off as a kid.
Fair. Never had the chance in Florida, Craig. He's the former FEMA Administrator, Craig Fugate. It's great to see you. Thanks for being with us on Bloomberg. Energy prices, as we mentioned, surging ahead of the storm's arrival here. Natural gas itself up over 60% this week. Crude oil futures getting back above $63 a barrel. For more, we turn now to power moves with Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, who's with us live from World Headquarters in New York. Is this a short squeeze on natural gas, Romaine, or a supply issue?
Well, a little bit. Well, yes and yes, Joe. I mean, as you know, most people know this, as natural gas prices go up, typically as temperatures go down. And we saw a big drop in temperatures here in the Northeast earlier in the week, coming out of last week. That's sent prices higher. You're basically paying roughly on the futures market about $5.25 or so. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were pretty much almost below $3. So a pretty big jump here. This week alone, we're up 70%, just over 4 days. That's the biggest jump that we've had on record. The records only go back to 1990, but it gives you a sense of the magnitude. But to put this into perspective, too, remember, these are kind of futures prices traded here in New York. When you look at the spot prices that individual municipalities will have to pay, particularly those in areas that aren't used to these types of temperature and snow type swings, you go down into Louisiana, Texas, you're paying $5.25 here in New York, you're paying $30 down there, $28 in Louisiana. So this is a huge impact, and that had a huge impact not just on what we saw on the price of natural gas, but also on a lot of the stocks that trade on it. Those, of course, surge as a lot of traders are trying to take advantage of this storm that is moving from the Rockies across the U.S. And you saw that reflected in the broader market. Fact, the best performing sector in the S&P 500 this week, it was energy stocks. A lot of that were natural gas stocks and some of that oil stocks, which also got a boost, not just, of course, of what's going on with the weather, but also with geopolitics as well.
Really interesting. I should have said $61 a barrel on WTI, by the way. Romaine, there's a big story on the terminal here that odds are rising for a chair, Rick Rieder, atop the Fed. This is somebody who's joined you on the program, on the close, more than once. What's the market think of this, and why are his odds rising?
Well, what the market thinks, I tell you, of all the names that have been floated here, I think Rick Rieder is the one that the market would embrace most. He is basically a denizen of Wall Street and a well-respected one. Yeah. A lot of people look at him as being someone who can not only be a steward for the Fed, but more importantly, also, I guess, let's just say navigate the political dynamics that have been going on between the Fed and the president. And at least based on the reporting that we have out of our reporters in Washington, it does seem that maybe Trump is kind of warming up to him a little bit more than he has the other candidates. And, I don't want to speculate too much here, Joe, but I think that if there was an announcement that Rick Rieder is going to be the next Fed chair nominee, I actually think you would see a rally in this market. There's been a lot of concern here about Fed independence, a lot of concern about whether the new Fed chair would just be sort of a submissive to the White House. They don't necessarily see that in a name like Rick Rieder, and his nomination, I think, would be a salve to a certain extent for some of the volatility we've seen in the market as of late.
Really fascinating. He checks the TV box, too. He's good on the air, which we know the boss likes.
He's been on this program a lot. Hopefully he keeps coming back, Joe.
Here. I look forward to the next one, Romaine. Hey, be safe up there in the snow this weekend.
You too.
Coming up, the Armada now heading to the Middle East. the threat from the president over Iran's renewed crackdown on protesters. We'll discuss with Danielle Pletka from the American Enterprise Institute next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We're watching Iran. You know, we have a lot of ships going that direction, just in case. We have a big flotilla going in that direction. We have an armada. We have a massive fleet heading in that direction, and maybe we won't have to use it. We'll see.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew. Thanks for being with us on this Friday edition. The president there speaking to the Navy carrier strike group that is now steaming its way toward Iran, just days after he backed away from threats against the regime over its handling of nationwide protests. This morning, the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency put the number of protesters arrested under the regime's crackdown at more than 26,000. Doctors in the country say the death toll may be at least 20,000. Although, to be clear, that figure has not been independently verified. Now, the president says nations who do business with Iran will be hit with a 25% tariff soon, to use his word. Joining us now with her insights into all of this, Danielle Pletka, Distinguished Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. It's great to have you back, Danielle. What happens when this carrier strike group arrives in the Mediterranean?
So I think we're looking at two parallel courses of events. One is the carrier strike group arrives in the region. It presents the president with options to strike the regime in Iran to back the protesters, as he promised earlier. The other is promises that the Iranian regime is making to pretty much anybody they can find inside the Trump administration, that they will come to the table, give up their nuclear program, give up their missiles, work with us. And so the question is really how seriously the Trump administration takes these Iranian promises that are made in desperation, and how much he wants to do something that he will be remembered for, I think, for posterity, which is to help to topple the most dangerous regime in the Middle East.
And what do you replace that regime with?
That's an outstanding question. And anybody who predicts revolutions ends up looking like an idiot in hindsight. And I'm not game to look like that big of an idiot. I don't know what comes. There are a number of options. There is the son of the Shah who lives in the United States and who is very popular and has said he wants to preside over a transition. That's very important. He doesn't want to restore the monarchy. Then there are people inside Iran. There are bad guys, too. There's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is the elite military that controls all the terrorist groups and is also responsible for regime protection. They are also in the mix. So there's some possibility of bad to worse, but there's a stronger possibility, I would say, of bad to better.
Interesting. To what extent do you believe Iran has managed to rebuild its nuclear capability as well as its ground-to-air defenses? If we were actually flying jets into that country, what would they face?
I don't think that the Iranians have done enough necessary to defend themselves on the surface-to-air front. The real deterrent that the Iranians have is one that they have used previously, and that is that they have been working very hard since last summer's Israel-United States strikes on their nuclear program to reconstitute their ballistic missile program. And what they're threatening is not, we will shoot your planes from the sky. What they're threatening is, we will hit civilians in your allied states, whether in Israel or in the UAE or in Saudi Arabia, as they've done before. And that's a pretty powerful deterrent in the region. On the nuclear front, they are determined, they're making progress, but very substantial damage was done, and that's not going to be something that they break out of anytime soon.
Interesting. What would they put up in the air? Are they still flying F-14 Tomcats? Is this like a 1980s movie?
You know, in their dreams, it's a 1980s movie. If anybody remembers the Top Gun Maverick, you know, kind of that sort of scene. But the reality is that the Iranians are not capable of deploying any really serious defenses, and we have seen that time again in multiple Israeli strikes and in American strikes.
Well, Danielle, this was a real trip around the world this week with Davos and the many areas that the president decided to weigh in. I could bring up Greenland right now, but I want to ask you about what the heck is going on with Canada. There's very tough words that we heard from the president this week. Canada lives because of the U.S., to the point where you've got Mark Carney making a trade deal with China. He was also disinvited. Carney was disinvited from the president's Board of Peace. Listen to the rhetoric between these two.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that.
Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership in the economy, in security, and in rich cultural exchange. But Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian.
Are we done here, Danielle? Have we broken up?
Well, in reality, the United States and Canada have been broken up for many years now when it comes to foreign policy and national security. As trading partners, we're never going to break up. They're our neighbors, and we need them. You know, the problem here is that everybody likes to criticize President Trump for his irresponsible rhetoric, for his over-the-top statements and criticisms, but they don't criticize our allies for rising to the bait. They like to pose themselves as the grown-ups in the room, but the reality is that Davos and other meetings like that end up looking like a group of 14-year-old boys in high school. Having been a 14-year-old girl, I would just say the best thing to do in these circumstances is to listen to the president, nod your head, and move on. I understand that's difficult in a democracy. You want to prove, Mark Carney wants to prove his manhood to the Canadian people and that he's standing up to Donald Trump. But you got to do the right thing for your country, and that means not behaving like a 14-year-old boy.
Wow, that's something. I'll tell you, the president
Sorry,
is...
I know you were a 14-year-old boy as well. My apologies.
I don't trust, don't worry. I didn't trust 14-year-old Joe Matthew anyway. Let me ask you about what's going on very quickly with Keir Starmer, who had some very tough words, the president, who said that the U.S. never needed NATO and accused our European allies of, quote, staying a little off the front lines in Afghanistan. Here's what Keir Starmer said in response.
Let me start by paying tribute to the 457 of our armed services who lost their lives in Afghanistan. I will never forget their courage, their bravery, and the sacrifice that they made for their country. There are many also who were injured, some with life-changing injuries. And so I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling.
I've only got 30 seconds, Danielle. I apologize in advance. Is this more acting like 14-year-old boys?
Look, this is Donald Trump acting like a 14-year-old boy, and I rarely agree with Keir Starmer about anything, but insulting and appalling are correct. The reality is our allies did stand by with us in Afghanistan. The British were probably the most useful, most important military that stood with us in Afghanistan, and the president shouldn't say things like that. But
Thank
he
you,
has
Danielle.
been very
It's great to have you back. Danielle Pletka, the
Yeah.
American Enterprise Institute. I'm sorry, Danielle. I hope we have more time next time. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio.
Essentially with TikTok, I have the right to either sell it or close it. And we'll make that determination. And we may have to get an approval from China, too. I'm not sure. But I'm sure they'll approve it. And if they don't approve it, it would be somewhat of a hostile act, I think. But it's good for China if it gets approved.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, where 1 year ago, President Trump spoke there on his inauguration day. About options for TikTok. Now, a year later, a deal has actually been secured. Closed late last night, TikTok and its Chinese parent ByteDance finished the deal to transfer parts of their U.S. operations to American investors, securing the app's future in the U.S. and avoiding a nationwide ban. The deal establishing a U.S. entity with Oracle, Silver Lake Management, MGX as managing investors. TikTok's CEO will have a seat on the board. Joining us now with all the details, Bloomberg's Mike Shepard. We talked about this a lot. They actually got it done. Now that this deal is in place, how will we be judging whether this arrangement works, whether the algorithm still works now that it's been transferred to a new owner?
Well, we're going to look at it a couple of different ways. And the first is really from the user perspective. Will they see any changes in their experience as a result of what happens to the algorithm? And under the agreement, what will happen is the U.S. entity that was just christened overnight, it will lease a copy of the algorithm from ByteDance, and then it will retrain it for the American audience, and it will try to hive it off from ByteDance and make sure the American users' data doesn't get shared with anyone in China. And that will be another benchmark, really, Joe, and that is on the security side. And this is going to be something that folks in Washington, especially on Capitol Hill, will be studying closely to see whether the deal actually abides by the security requirements that the 2024 divestiture ban law had put in place. And that is namely, ByteDance doesn't have any operational role. The new owners and the president have assured us, including in an executive order that Trump signed in September, that there will not be an operational role. But there is still doubts owing to the fact that they are leasing and not recreating the algorithm altogether.
There was a Bloomberg exclusive today that jumps to another important company, and that's NVIDIA. Still with regard to China in this case, NVIDIA apparently not only cleared on our end to sell its lower-end AI chips, these are the H200s. But China is now, according to Bloomberg News, telling its biggest tech companies, including Alibaba, to start preparing orders. So is this open season? What does it mean for NVIDIA's bottom line?
It's a great question, Joe, because it really is one of the mysteries surrounding what the president has tried to do over the past month, and that is open the door for NVIDIA to be able to return to the Chinese market, where just a few years ago they had a 95% market share in AI chips. But with U.S. restrictions imposed since 2022, that share has gone down to 0%. And they really would like to get back in. They see it as a $50 billion opportunity. And while the president and even the Commerce Department have been opening the door for this to happen with the H200, which is a generation back when it comes to NVIDIA's AI chips, we hadn't really heard officially from the Chinese. This is just our reporting with sources, but the indications are that China is moving closer toward an approval. They have signaled to companies including Alibaba, Tencent, and even ByteDance, we were just talking about them, that if they want to purchase some AI chips, they can start making preparations to do so, and including how many they might even want to get approval for.
We didn't exactly see a blow-off top on NVIDIA stock today. Are investors skeptical about this working?
Well, look, when it came to NVIDIA, the trade has been so high for so long. It's becoming harder and harder to impress investors and really leave a mark, if you will. And what they're looking for is really more assurance and I guess a better sense, Joe, of exactly how many chips we're talking about when it comes to China. If it's only tens of thousands, it's not that much. If we get closer to several 100,000, then it really does look like a meaningful injection of revenue that they can count on and that could be traded on and invested on, too. And the question is also, what does it mean, Joe, when it comes to the later generations of chips? We're talking about the Blackwell. NVIDIA has also sought permission to sell that in China. And then the even more recent generation, which is about to come online, the Vera Rubin. In a few years, will we be talking about that? And trying to get permission for that to be sold to China?
Really interesting. Just very quickly, Mike, we've only got 30 seconds. Intel. Brutal today, down 17%. I realize we had a big run into earnings. Is this an Intel story or a broader semiconductor story?
Well, it really is an Intel story, Joe, because the whole question surrounding the company is the turnaround. And it has been a saga that is turning now into a never-ending story. And it is really, you could even see the frustration for the CEO, Lip-Bu Tan, during the investor call yesterday, expressing his chagrin that really the production standards and manufacturing were really not up to his own expectations. They are struggling to find the big customers for their chips. They are trying to get back into the foundry business, one that they had kind of ceded over to Asian companies many, many years ago. They're trying to take it back and really build here in the U.S. But to do so, they need to show that they can actually produce the chips and do so in a profitable fashion. And that's something called yield. And the yield that they have been getting on those chips, that is the number of chips that are usable and sellable compared to the total number produced. It's lower than what they want and what customers are really expecting. So he needs to see, and laid this out for investors yesterday, a lot more improvement on that front to make a breakthrough.
Great reporting, Mike. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you,
always.
Joe.
Bloomberg's Michael Shepard. Good luck with the storm, Shep. A New York judge has ruled that a single congressional district in New York must be redrawn. The 11th, that's Staten Island, which is represented by Republican Nicole Malliotakis, who joined me on the early edition of Balance of Power. And being in New York, I had to start by asking her if the city is ready for this weekend storm.
I hope so, and I believe we will be. New York's the type of city that in many ways can run on autopilot. But I do believe that you have enough individuals, particularly the rank and file men and women who go out there every day to keep our city safe and clean. They're going to be the ones really running the show on the ground, and I have full faith that they'll be able to do it.
Saw the briefing earlier from Mayor Mamdani. He says school days are canceled. This could be fraught politically, Congresswoman. But I'm just wondering if you buy into this media narrative that this is the big test, that this is do or die for New York's new mayor.
Look, I think nothing upsets people more than if they come out of their house and their streets are not plowed properly. We saw this before with definitely de Blasio. A lot of people were very upset about the way they mishandled snowstorms. So I think, there's no Republican or Democrat way to take out the garbage, they say. And I believe that the same thing when it comes to shoveling the snow and plowing the snow. So I think it is a test. It is. He'll definitely get the heat if it's not cleaned properly, and he certainly probably won't get the credit if it is done well. It'll go to the men and women on the ground. So it's like a no-win situation for politicians.
Wow. Well, that's even-handed analysis. I guess whether you're Zoran Mamdani or Greg Abbott, this is a very real test, as a lot of people are hunkering down here. I've got to ask you, Congresswoman, what it's like to wake up in the morning and hear from a judge that your workplace should no longer exist. I'm referring to the ruling that we discussed on Bloomberg, and I know that you have some, I'm sure, pretty strong thoughts about this. This is your first national interview since a judge ruled that your district should be redrawn. You're no stranger to redistricting in New York, and I'm wondering what will be your recourse.
Look, we fought this battle in 2022 and 2024 successfully. Here we are again, third time running for re-election, and it's the third time we're having a fight over the district map. And this is because the Democrats simply can't beat me on merit, on policy, on debate. In 2020, this seat was represented by a Democrat, and the people of Staten Island, Southern Brooklyn fired that individual because he was doing a bad job. They hired me, a Republican. I am the only Republican who represents our city in Washington. But the bottom line here is that it was the people's choice. Now you have a Washington law firm who's basically saying, we don't care what the people of Staten Island say, how they vote. We want to be able to fix this map so they can never elect a Republican ever again. They're going to get stuck with the Democrat that we say is going to be the one to run there. And that is very unfortunate. That is certainly not what you expect from the people who call themselves the defenders of democracy. And we're going to fight it tooth and nail. And if we have to take it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, we will, because we need to fight to protect the voices of this group of constituents that I represent, who have spoken very loud and clearly in the last few elections.
Well, this, if I understand the case, the court ruled the boundaries of your district, the 11th year, unfairly dilutes Black and Latino voters. What would be your message to those voters?
Well, I'm the first Hispanic, half Cuban, to represent this district, the first minority. So that's kind of interesting that they would claim that. But what's even more ludicrous is their solution. The proposed solution of the plaintiffs is to put Staten Island with Lower Manhattan, which would add more white voters to the district. So it really absolutely makes no sense. It is completely meritless. The only reason it got anywhere, quite frankly, is because the judge was the chief of staff and counsel to Governor Kathy Hochul. You can't just go to your friends on the bench and expect like whatever political outcome you want because you can't win at the ballot box. That's not the way democracy works. And I think it's wrong when Republicans do it as well. I've been very critical, right? I've been very consistent on this issue.
You have.
Political gerrymandering is wrong because it should be the people who elect their representatives, not the other way around.
Yeah, your consistency is noted, Congresswoman. You were the first, I think, Republican on our air to oppose the Texas redistricting that, of course, created a national movement on both sides of the aisle. But this idea of putting Lower Manhattan into your districts, could a Republican win in Manhattan?
Look, I think the idea here, their idea, is to make it so difficult where a Republican can never win. And it's not just a Republican winning, my district. This would mean that New York City would no longer have any competitive districts, right? Not one competitive seat. And New York City will never have another Republican representing our city in Washington. I believe bipartisan representation of our city is incredibly important, particularly now where you have a Democrat mayor, you have a Republican president. I think I've done a good job of protecting our city. I went to President Trump when DHS was going to cut Homeland Security counterterrorism funding to our NYPD. We worked to get that money back when they were going to cut World Trade Center healthcare program employees that serve our first responders who are still battling illnesses from 9/11. I fought DOJ and I got those employees hired back with my colleagues. And so what I would say is it is incredibly important that we have bipartisan representation in Washington. And what the Democrats are trying to do here is ensure that there'll never be another Republican representing our city on the federal level.
To be continued. Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis of New York earlier today on Bloomberg. You can find our full interview on the terminal or online. Coming up, millions of Americans are bracing for what's expected to be the most powerful winter storm of the season. We'll discuss up ahead and how French President Emmanuel Macron's sunglasses might be creating a brighter future for an Italian company. We'll have details next on Balance of Power, only on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thanks for joining us. We'll assemble our political panel in just a moment. Rick and Jeannie are with us. First, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. Hundreds of businesses across Minnesota closed their doors today as part of a strike against the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. No work, shopping, or dining out was the message delivered by the state's business owners in solidarity with protesters across the state. The day-long strike comes after weeks of increased protests and a surge of ICE agents in the state that has resulted in more than 3,000 arrests, 2 shootings, and chaotic scenes in the Minneapolis and St. Paul areas. Secretary Sean Duffy is reportedly pushing for an Indycar race around the U.S. Capitol and hitting some congressional roadblocks in the process, according to Punchbowl News. Get this, the route would start at the Supreme Court and include a full lap around the mall. Pit Row would be by the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. Maybe they could fill it with gas. But the plan needs congressional approval since there's a ban on advertising on Capitol grounds. According to Punchbowl, Democrats are skeptical of the route, citing concerns for the city's roads and police officers. The proposed race will be part of the America 250 celebration. Organizers are eyeing late August for the event, when it should be about 100 degrees on the mall. And iVision Tech, a small Italian company that makes sunglasses, received website crashing traffic yesterday after French President Emmanuel Macron wore a pair of their eye-catching aviators on stage at Davos. Investors also rushed to join in, with shares of the company jumping more than 70% this week, pushing iVision's market value to 19 million euros. I'm working on it. Just trying to keep up with the style here. Joining us now with their reactions to all these stories, this evening's political panel I don't know if they have their sunglasses, but I hope they've got their hats and gloves. Rick Davis, Bloomberg politics contributor, Republican strategist, and partner at Stone Court Capital, joined by Democratic analyst Jeannie Shanzano, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Great to see you both. You ready for an Indycar race in August in Washington? Are we really doing this?
I hope not. As if Washington needs more congestion in the summertime. Forget the fact that we already have millions of tourists flocking in exactly the same place they want to do this race. Right. So I'm hoping that the Supreme Court says something like, oh, no, they can't do it. Who's going to argue with the Supreme Court?
Right. Vegas is one thing, Jeannie. Are we really? I remember they were going to do an F1 race in the city of Boston. I drove the track with the organizers. Nobody actually thought that was going to happen. How about here?
You know, I am all for it, Joe. Rick should not poo-poo such good ideas. I'm all for it. I would really love to see an F1 race in D.C. Bring it to New York. Come on, folks. We can do it. And, Joe, I think, Joe, you wearing those sunglasses, the price is going to skyrocket even further. So forget Emmanuel Macron. You're killing it.
Well, thank you. I thought he looked kind of like Cartman with the reflector glasses, but I'll do my best with this. Now, think about 100 degrees on the Mall. Would you rather do that in August, Rick Davis, or would you prefer Las Vegas in August? Republicans moving a step closer to finalizing plans for a midterm convention, and it looks like that's where they want to hold it. Who ever heard of what is a midterm convention going to do for Republicans?
If those are my two options, start your engines. I mean, Vegas in August. Yeah, that's a good idea. And by the way, right in the heart of the midterms, let's take all the attention out of your district, put it in Vegas, put it on Donald Trump. I mean, every single House member who's got an R by their name is going to try and convince people it's not about the party, it's about your relationship with me. And we're going to take a time out and say, no, it's about the party.
Yes, and Donald Trump, right?
And Donald Trump.
Of course, be the keynote speaker in this case, Jeannie. Is there something smart here? Well, like Rick always says, all politics are national now. And if that's the case, do Democrats follow?
No, there is nothing smart about this. There is nothing people like less than Washington, D.C. Voters are not that excited about Donald Trump right now, even many Republicans. These folks need to be back in their districts and saying, I am going to fight for you and make everything much more affordable, not go spend money in Las Vegas. See, this is what I don't get about this whole thing. If you're going to do it, go to Pennsylvania, go to Ohio. You don't go to the glittering city of Las Vegas. No, folks. It's a wrong message in an affordability election.
You've actually planned a convention. I remember being there in St. Paul, a couple of them. Well, at least your candidate was, your nominee, of course, was in 2008. If you were putting this together, how would you do this if this is, in fact, about congressional races, your own home district? How do you project that nationally?
Well, you know, what goes into a convention is you got to have people, right? So how do you select the people from all the states to come in there? Because the premise is going to be they're going to work on a platform or they're going to do something. You know, it's not just a rally, a big national rally in Las Vegas. So there's a lot of prep that has to be done, and there's a lot of disruption that occurs in the states. Fundraising for this, that kind of thing. We're going to take money out of your district. We're going to put it into Vegas. Hopefully we get on black or red, whatever hits, you know, we can make some kind of a political argument out of it. But also it's just the topics you're going to talk about. You're right. I mean, right now we're going to then take all the national issues and drive them into the congressional debate while they're trying to talk about local issues. And I don't know. Look, Susie Wiles wants to make this midterm about Donald Trump. Mostly presidents run away from midterms being about themselves, but they're going all in. So prepare for a convention in Vegas.
So maybe Donald Trump is on the ballot. Jeannie, you've got trouble in New York. The mayor is canceling snow days. Listen to Zoran Mamdani at his briefing from earlier today.
While we are still waiting to make a final decision on whether school will be in person or virtual, we will communicate that decision to families by noon on Sunday. That is going to be a decision between in-person learning and remote learning. I have to apologize to the students that were hoping for a different answer. For a traditional snow day, that will not be the case.
Jeannie, is this smart politics? Our producer Tim said earlier today, kids are single-issue voters. You're going to take snow days away?
Yeah, good thing they can't vote till they're 18. And plus, really, Democrats firmly believe that kids should be educated. So I'm with Zoran Mamdani. Get those kids to school, remote or not. And by the way, thank goodness he is wearing a traditional coat for these moments and not like a Greg Bovino coat, like the long green one we're starting to see on some of the ICE agents. So I think he's doing everything right so far. It depends on how this all goes.
He had the emergency management jacket on. He's playing the part. That's how you do it when you're mayor. I don't know. Is there something smart here? Maybe you're getting parents off the hook for daycare. What's he thinking?
To me, you want me to ask?
Let's go.
What does a socialist think? Look, there's a generation of New Yorkers who are going to grow up disliking the socialist movement.
Wow.
So, I mean, I think do more of this. I'm for it.
You know about the politics of snow. This is actually, all jokes aside, a big test for this mayor.
Yeah. It is, because it's not about the kids at home. They'll find a way to skip school. I certainly did. But what really is important is that New Yorkers are going to, this is like a big test for him, because he's got to make everything work, right? And he's just set the high bar. He's like, one thing I'm going to deliver to you is preparation.
Yes.
So the minute the snow doesn't get plowed, the minute the trash doesn't get picked up on time, you know, the minute there's something wrong in the subways, he's going to get blamed for that. And so rather than saying, hey, this is a tough city to manage and we're all going to have to string together and I'm going to need the city to cooperate, stay off the roads, try not to do much while the emergency personnel work, he's like, no, we got this.
Yeah,
okay, buddy.
That's right.
You got it.
Well, what do you make of his confidence, JD? Is he ready?
He is a New Yorker, folks. I know you are down in the D.C. area. You have some trouble when there's a little snow in Virginia. He is going to be fine. He is, I think. I mean, Mayor Lindsay had some trouble. I know de Blasio had some trouble, but Mamdani knows what he's doing. So I am firmly confident he's going to rock this like Mike Dukakis, except it will go over a little better than Dukakis did.
Wow. All right. I'm not. Listen, they do that differently in Massachusetts anyway. It's one thing for Zoran Mamdani, Rick Davis. It's another for Greg Abbott. This is a big test in Texas when it comes to hardening that grid. They've also been talking a big game down there.
Yeah, and he's failed in the past, right? So, Texas has been hit with some really extreme weather in the past. They haven't reacted well to it. They've tried to upgrade their grid. They're one of the very few states that have its own grid. So they're solely responsible for the power distribution in their own state. And he cannot afford another disaster. One, it puts the public at risk. And so this is going to be a great test for the technology they've employed and their ability in public service to make things work. And look, I mean, he's at the tail end of his governorship. He's not running for re-election. This is a legacy item for a guy who's really been a great governor.
Fascinating. We're going to all be watching this very closely, and that's the point. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, we thank you. I know Rick's got his chains on the snowblower, and I wish you luck with the storm this weekend. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter if you want to curl up in the storm, and thanks for joining us on Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. This is Bloomberg.